Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field.
Hey, have you ever been faced with the challenge of sourcing, installing, and programming a used control module in a vehicle? I know a lot of us have. It seems to be happening more and more often today with the volume of control modules on vehicles, the cost of some new ones, or even the availability of new control modules. In some cases, used may be the only option. So what do you do here? I strongly recommend checking out SJ Auto Solutions and Tommy Oliva. Tommy offers a cloning service for used control modules to make these things plug and play for the vehicle that you're working on. In a lot of cases, he is also able to source the control modules if you're unable to locate one for the vehicle that you're working on. But once you get connected with Tommy, he's going to offer fantastic support from start to finish to make sure that that control module is going to work in your application. He's also got tech support that he offers through his website, along with some free resources there as well on information about used control module programming. So make sure to check out SJ Auto Solutions. I can't recommend that enough. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. My name is Sean Tipping, and I'll be your host once again for this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me on the show this week. I'm going to talk about an interesting Jeep Grand Cherokee that I had recently. Had to do some programming trickery to get this thing in the state that the customer requested, and also talk about a software that I've been using for quite a while. And maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't, but it's pretty useful in a situation like this. So before we get going, I want to apologize about the audio mix-up last week. I fired my editor. Actually, that's me. So if you delete the download and re-download it, it's fixed, but probably too late for most people. We'll get it right this week. So with that out of the way, let's jump into this one. I'll give you the rundown here of what the customer requested. This is a used car lot, but a little bit of a higher end one. They sell some nicer vehicles most of the time. This one, maybe could be an exception to that, but I guess where I'm getting at is this isn't your bottom of the barrel used car lot, and there's plenty of those out there. And usually what I find there is they're trying to get by as absolutely cheap as possible, even if that is being negligent and doing things that are not in their customer's best interest. And we run into those places, and a few of them I've just chosen not to work with, or they've chosen not to work with us because they don't like our prices. But this is a better shop. I've done a lot of work with these guys and I actually really like them. But anyways, that part of it doesn't really matter that much. Just setting up the scene here. They called me because they had a 2017 Jeep Grand Cherokee. And basically, their main issue with this, they actually had two issues, and I'll get into both of them because we were able to correct both issues that they had. But their main issue was that the volume for the radio was not adjustable. Okay, so regardless of what audio source you were using, whether it was an auxiliary input or Bluetooth or FM, AM radio, it didn't really matter. There was one setting for the volume, and although you could see the volume input change on the screen if you move the dial, the actual output, the volume out of the speakers did not change. And it was pretty loud too. It was set at a higher level. So it was, you listen to it loud or you turn it off. And that was pretty much it. And so this was a car that they were actually selling, and they did sell. And they attempted to fix it on their own. They actually do quite a bit of work and diagnostics by themselves, and they decided to replace the radio unit itself. And this is one of the Uconnect touchscreen style radios that are used in a lot of the Jeeps, the Cherokees and the Grand Cherokees. It's got the touchscreen and everything. And they replaced it with a used unit that was matched up with a part number. They were able to figure out the radio code and all that stuff. Again, pretty sharp shop. They know what they're doing. But they were not able to correct the problem by replacing the radio. Now, he did note when he called me, he said, so we replaced the radio, and when I first put the radio in and turned the ignition on, the volume worked. I was able to adjust it. But then after we turned the key off and turned the key back on, it went back to the original problem with the other radio. And we tried unplugging and plugging back in, didn't make a difference. Now we can't adjust the volume anymore. And we're really not sure what's going on here. And he said he tried to dig into see if there was, an amplifier problem. Again, these guys are pretty sharp. They've been through some problems on cars, and they realized that if there's a radio and an amplifier, the amplifier, which actually outputs the output to the speakers, if that's bad, that can affect the volume level. And they've seen that before. Maybe it's got some water in it or something like that. But they were not able to find an amplifier in the spot that it was supposed to be on this vehicle. And at that point, he kind of gave up and said, hey, can you guys come check this one out? We're not sure, if this is a diagnostic or a programming thing, but we're at the limit of our capacity, and we just want you to come out and figure it out. Okay. And then he also did mention the second problem on this one. He's like, this one's not as important, but we would like to get it figured out. If you're going to sell the vehicle, you want everything functioning. This is a 4x4 Jeep Grand Cherokee, obviously, and it has a terrain switch in the center console. And so it's a knob for the drivetrain, the all-wheel drive, and you can switch it from sand, mud, snow. There's a 4 low. There's a hill descent button. It's right there in the center console, just below where the shifter is. And this switch doesn't light up, doesn't do anything. And he told me, he's like, I checked it. It's pretty simple. It's a power, it's a ground, and it's a LIN bus to this thing. And that's it. And that's all there, but the switch doesn't light up. And he's like, look into that if you can. But our main concern is the radio, because it's basically unusable at this point, and that's tough to sell a vehicle in that state. Okay. So I get out there, and when I'm checking this vehicle out, I immediately notice something about it that stands out kind of as a red flag. When I open the door, I saw a VIN sticker on this thing that didn't look like the normal Chrysler VIN sticker. And if you've seen a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram VIN sticker, it's a white sticker, has a barcode on it, has the VIN number, and then a bunch of other vehicle information. That wasn't there. This was a completely different sticker. And it said State of Michigan, replacement, and then it had a VIN number printed out on it, and then some other reference numbers on the bottom of it. But this is not a OE sticker that you would find on it. And it had the VIN number, which I assumed was the VIN number of this 17 Jeep Grand Cherokee, but it immediately stands out as a red flag. I've never seen this before. Now, I'm in Minnesota for reference, so this is obviously from another state, but I'm immediately like, okay, well, what's the deal with this vehicle? It got a replacement VIN tag. I'm not familiar with how that process works, but let me scan the vehicle and see what's going on here. But, my spidey senses are up here that something might be goofy. I might see something different. And I did look up at the windshield where the normal VIN tag would be, right? You can look in on the driver's side through the windshield and see the VIN tag. That was gone. There's no VIN there. So I'm also thinking, is there something goofy here where this is stolen? And we'll talk about how you might want to proceed with a vehicle like this. Now, again, this is a reputable place, but, maybe they got involved with something that's not legitimate. Maybe this is part of whatever this replacement VIN tag is. I'm not sure yet, but again, spidey senses are up, so I'm going to proceed with caution. And it does immediately trigger me to think, well, this very well could have something to do with why the radio is not functioning correctly if we've got some sort of rebuilt vehicle. But I got to get into it and scan it, and then I'll do some checks just to make sure I'm not helping someone with a stolen vehicle, or maybe a stolen vehicle that needs to be, we need to alert the authorities. So I haven't personally run into that, but I have some friends that they get into, especially if you run into like some Dodge vehicles, Dodge Chargers and Challengers and stuff like that. You can see like mismatched VINs or multiple VINs in a vehicle, and you want to be real careful in this situation. I know some friends who do remote, and they'll run away from things like this if they can't be at the vehicle, because you could be helping someone out with a stolen vehicle. Now, in some cases, it's been a situation where the person in possession of the vehicle or the shop in possession of the vehicle had no idea that's what was going on. But by doing some checks, doing your due diligence, you can figure out, okay, is this something that, I need to stay away from, or even, alert the local authorities to like, hey, this might be a stolen vehicle that's been put back together. Now, again, I saw the sticker from the state of Michigan, so maybe it's legit. I don't know, but let's get into this and figure it out. So I do a vehicle scan, and this is just to kind of give me an overview of what's going on with this vehicle, and then I'm going to compare it to the VIN number that's on the B pillar there. So what I do find out is there are two different VINs. The scan tool that I'm using identifies a completely I shouldn't say completely different, but a different VIN than what I see on the sticker on the door. So I'm not going to read off the whole VIN numbers to you. That would not be worthwhile, but I am going to give you the last 3 digits just to show, okay, these are different. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 digits of the VIN are identical, but the rest of them are different. Besides the year, the 10th digit is H for both of them, both 2017. But again, I'll read the last 3 just to reference the 2 different VIN numbers. So the one on the door ends in 100, and the one that my scan tool registers when I ID the vehicle, which through this should either be the RF hub or the BCM. I think it's the BCM that the scan tool uses in this case to identify the vehicle. It is 679, right? So on the door is 100 is the last 3. In the vehicle, the modules that my scan tool communicates with and identifies the vehicle is 679. So we're dealing with 2 different VIN numbers here. Now, again, without digging into it any further than that, I can assume this probably has something to do with the radio not functioning correctly, and I'll get into the details of that. I'm pretty familiar with Chrysler products and how the configuration gets set up, that I can see where that part of it is going. But before I proceed, and before you would want to proceed in a situation like this, we want to make sure that we're not dealing with any sort of a stolen vehicle, right? Again, this particular location, I really, really doubt that they would ever knowingly participate in anything like this, but I don't know, who knows? People can deceive you for sure, and I don't want to be, part of that. Actually, I'm dealing with a situation right now where I've got to go to court in August for some keys I made for a gentleman who ended up using the keys he sold the vehicle to someone, and then he went with the key I made and stole the vehicle back. And so I didn't do anything, wrong. I'm actually testifying on behalf of the state of Minnesota. But when I made the keys, he had ownership and possession of the vehicle, and I just made a copy of a key for him, or 2 copies. And then he went and did this after he had those copies of the keys. So you never know what kind of trouble you can be getting into, and I'm more and more cautious as time progresses, because there's lots of people out there that are doing shady stuff, and car theft is just rampant these days. So anyways, I'm cautious here. So what you want to do in a situation like this, obviously talk to your customer and see what they know, and I did do that. But before I even do that, I'm going to run these VIN numbers through a website, and I encourage anybody else to do this if you're in a situation like this. What you can Google to find this, if you don't want to type in the actual website, the website is nicb.org/VINcheck. So that's easy enough. I'll put a link in the show notes to this. But just Google stolen VIN check. And it is the National Insurance Crime Bureau has a free link that you can just click on and then go in, put the VIN number in, click that you're not a robot and that you agree to the terms, hit search, and it's going to tell you if that VIN comes up as a theft record or a total loss. And so you can put these VIN numbers in. And I would recommend if you're doing keys for stuff, this is a really good thing to do to make sure the vehicle's not stolen. And again, it'll show you if it was a total loss at some point or another. So I put both of these VIN numbers in here, the one that I see on the door and the one that comes up in the vehicle, right through the control modules, just to see like what am I dealing with? Are either of the VIN numbers here come up as a stolen vehicle? Because I'm stopping, I'm not doing anything more, and we're talking to the customer at that point. For this one, neither of them came up as theft records, and interestingly enough, neither one came up as total loss records. Now, I Googled both of the VINs, and the 100, the actual vehicle, didn't come up with anything, but the 679 VIN number, that's the one that's in the modules, that one came up as an auction vehicle. It was sold through Copart, and it looked like it was a front end collision and the whole front end was destroyed. So I'm not sure why that didn't come up as the total loss record, but it looks like it had been through auction. Now, just at first glance, what I'm guessing is the VIN number that I read through the scan tool was a control module that was taken from this smashed up vehicle and then put into this 100, the actual physical VIN number. But neither of them come up as stolen. But at this point, I'm going to go talk to my customer and be like, hey, before I proceed, what's the deal here? And they said they did buy this one from the auction, and they had proof that they purchased it. And so everything seems legit. Nothing is popping up as like, hey, this is a stolen vehicle, or we have modules out of a stolen vehicle. They have proof of ownership of this thing. At this point, I'm not too concerned that I'm assisting anyone in a theft of the vehicle. We've just got a strange situation here. Now, as far as the not showing up as a total loss, I'm guessing it has something to do with that tag that's on it from the state of Michigan, that it was rebuilt. Now, if you were to get a Carfax on this thing, I bet you could see more info. I didn't want to pay the $50, and I don't have a service that pulls that up automatically. I think somebody told me, I think it was Don and Kyle last week, told me if you have Shop Monkey, you can see the Carfax to the vehicle, and maybe that makes a case to get that. But anyways, I didn't have any more info on it, but I don't believe I'm dealing with a stolen vehicle at this point. It just looks like it's a Frankenstein, and it was reassembled using modules from another vehicle. Now, what modules? That's the next question. If I'm going to proceed and try to fix this, of course, I need to figure out exactly, does that have anything to do with my radios not working correctly? I have a feeling it is, but let's dig into this a little bit more and see. And the first thing I want to know is this 679 VIN that I get when I ID the vehicle, what modules have that as their VIN number? And I go through, and I did not check every single modules, but I kind of checked the mission critical ones, right? The ones that I know it's important for them to have the correct VIN number, or I should say matching VIN number. And that was something interesting too, there was some codes in the vehicle, not a ton actually, but there were some codes. None of them indicated a mismatch VIN. And if you've ever worked on Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram products, especially canned stuff, 2008 and up, they're pretty quick to set original VIN mismatch codes. Even if it's like an ABS module, it'll set a code if the VIN number between these critical modules don't match. And what do I mean by critical? So that might vary depending on the specific application that you're dealing with. But the 17 Grand Cherokee that I'm working on, I'm thinking powertrain control module, body control module, and RF hub. Those are the big three players that I'm thinking about as far as what needs to start the vehicle, immobilizer data needs to match, that sort of stuff. Now, could be ABS, could be some other modules. Obviously, I'm going to be looking at the radio to see what's going on there. But those three modules that I mentioned, the powertrain, the RF, and the body control module, I went into those modules specifically, individually, and looked at the VIN number that was listed. And they all had the 679, which was not the one that was on the tag of the vehicle. So what it looks like to me is that someone took a handful of modules, and it could be more than just those three. Again, I didn't go through every module. I'm just trying to get a feel for what's going on. But it looks like somebody took a group of modules out of this other smashed up Jeep that had been in a front end collision, and they had put all of those modules into this vehicle. And so even though the tag on the vehicle, that VIN number didn't match, all the modules that were critical to the operation of the vehicle, their VIN numbers did match. And so nobody's upset. Now, this is where this is important involving the radio. Because the body control module specifically has a different VIN number, the configuration, or one could say the coding, although Chrysler doesn't use that terminology, but if you're familiar with other vehicles, coding would be a good way to put this. But the configuration of the vehicle is going to be based off of that 679 VIN number. Okay. Now, what if, and this is where my mind's going, what if that 100, the actual physical Jeep in front of me, configuration is different than the 679? Now, based off of a quick look at the VIN, they're both 2017 Jeep Grand Cherokees, but they had a lot of different options, even just in 1 year of a Jeep Grand Cherokee. There's a bunch of different trim models and different configurations and different things that could be applied to one vehicle or another. And what if we have different configurations? And what if that has something to do not only with our radio, but with our terrain switch not working? It very well could. Now, how do I verify this? And then, of course, how do I fix it is the next question. But how do I verify this? How can I find out just for sure without like going in and actually trying to fix anything? How can I verify that these two Jeeps are different in configuration so that I know that I'm not going down the wrong rabbit hole? This is where Repair Link Shop comes in real handy, especially for domestic vehicles. You'll find if you use Repair Link Shop to look up VIN attributes of foreign vehicles, it's hit or miss at best. But domestic vehicles, so that's Ford, GM, Chrysler, if you put in the VIN number in question and then go to the VIN attributes and use the Control F feature, you can find out just about everything for that particular VIN that it was equipped with from the factory, and down to the audio and the drivetrain applications, which of course is what we're after in this case. So I do that. I put in the 679 VIN and I put in the 100 VIN, two different tabs open, and I pull up the VIN attributes and I look specifically at the radio application and then also with the drivetrain application. And that's where my difference lies. And I look based on the audio application between the two VIN numbers. The 679 VIN number has an amplifier. So that is the Jeep that these modules were taken out of because it was smashed up and put into the existing Jeep that I'm sitting in. Now the 100, the VIN number of the Jeep that I'm sitting in, does not have an amplifier based on the audio setup. And you can actually see this in the VIN attributes. If you Control F and put amp or amplifier, you see it in one and not the other. So without really digging into any diagnostics, right? I haven't really diagnosed anything. I'm not looking at data PIDs. I'm not, checking circuits. I'm not looking components up or anything like that. I can pretty safely assume the reason my audio doesn't work is because the radio in there is looking for an amplifier, but the amplifier's not there. Now you might ask, okay, well, they replaced the radio, so even if the radio that was in there was from the 679 Jeep, and I don't know whether it was or not, this is a different one. What's the deal there? Well, in this particular application of Jeep, and there is a difference on how this is done as far as the configuration or coding of the vehicle. There's a vehicle configuration that's stored in the BCM. Now, how this is distributed to the other modules, if you have a Fiat architecture vehicle, like a Jeep Renegade or something like that, or even the Jeep Cherokees are like this, you do a proxy relearn, and the rest of the modules in the vehicle would then take the configuration from the BCM and apply whatever the BCM says this VIN has or does not have. In this application in a Grand Cherokee, this one's not a Fiat architecture. What I mean by Fiat architecture is 2014 or 15, it was Fiat Chrysler, and the Fiat style of architecture of the vehicle and how the modules were set up was a little different than what they'd been doing prior to that partnership or sale of the company. And of course, it's Chrysler, it's Daimler Chrysler, it's Fiat Chrysler, it's Stellantis, and it gets so confusing of the different iterations of that company. But there was a difference there between Fiat architecture and not. If you do any mobilizer stuff, you know too, like there's a 4-digit pin, or aftermarket tooling give you a 5-digit pin, and that's how you can identify what you're dealing with. Anyways, this one's not. And so what happens on a vehicle, one of these, I would say CAN bus, but not Fiat architecture Chrysler vehicles, is the configuration is stored in the body control module that basically tells all the rest of the modules that need to know, hey, these are the options in this vehicle. And the hardware, one particular piece of hardware, could be used in a lot of different applications, but it will change what it's looking for or how it operates based on the configuration that's stored in that BCM. Now, when does it look at that? I don't have any exact science on this, but after several power cycles, right, so the vehicle's powered down completely and then turned back on, these modules are going to look to the BCM and say, hey, what's the configuration? And if it's no different, it's not going to change anything. But I mentioned when he installed his used radio, the volume actually worked until he cycled the key. And then that radio observed the configuration that was in the body control module and went back to the failure state that it had with the other one. And actually, I wouldn't even say failure. It's doing what it's supposed to, right? It's seeing that, hey, I need an amplifier. I'm looking for an amplifier. There is no amplifier. So you get one output volume in that case. And that, would be considered the failure state because it's not what we want, but the radio is actually doing what it's supposed to. There is no amplifier in this vehicle. And my customer actually looked and could not find it. It's supposed to be in the left rear quarter panel behind the plastic. There's nothing there. There's no connector. It just doesn't exist on this vehicle. And according to the VIN attributes in RepairLink shop, it doesn't have an amplifier. It does not exist. So it's just not going to work that way. Okay, so how do we fix this? Or can we fix this? There's some different options that you have here, right? Install a different wiring harness and an amplifier? No, we're probably not going to do that. What's the right way to do it? Well, the right way to do it would be to get all new modules that are, again, the mission critical or the ones that have the 679 VIN number in them, is to get all new modules, program them to the 100 VIN, the VIN number on the door tag, and then let Chrysler's configuration file fix it and it'll work properly. That would be the 100%, by the book way to fix this car. Now, the shop's probably not going to go for it, and I like to see, can I fix this with the existing parts that are on the vehicle? And we do have some ways to do this, and that's why I'm really telling you about this and sharing it as an episode, because you can correct stuff like this. There's some caveats and there's some things to be aware of and some warnings you want to give to your customer, but we can make some stuff happen. We can get it to work. So I mentioned the configuration in the body control module. Now, the other thing I thought about was, could I change the VIN numbers in those existing modules? Maybe, but that actually requires a lot of work too, because again, I don't know how many modules all have that 679 VIN number, and I don't know how many of those modules would be easy to change the VIN number, especially the RF hub. That's the one that stands out in my mind, that might not be an easy thing. Would it be possible to change the VIN number? Maybe it's board work, but is it going to be easy to do? And how many modules do I have to do this on? that seems like a lot of work. And, I'll give them the option like, hey, it's X amount of dollars for me to change all these VIN numbers, or you can buy new modules, weigh that option. Do I have anything else that I can do? And again, I do have another thing that we can try. And I talked to him about it, like, hey, we can try this, and we'll see if we can get this to work. So I mentioned the module configuration in the BCM. Now, where that comes from, that configuration file, which is really just all the options and the coding structure of a particular VIN number, it's stored on Chrysler's server, right? And you can actually, with YTech, go in and hit restore configuration to a vehicle. And take note of that. That's important to know here. It's actually really important if you're going to go down the road that I'm going down today. Because with YTech, the factory scan tool application, you can do something that's called restore configuration. And in my understanding, that's the only tool that will do a restore configuration, because it takes the file from Chrysler's server that has all the different options for that vehicle, right? Does it have an amp or not? Does it have a terrain switch or not? And it's going to put that into the BCM. And again, after several power cycles, and sometimes it's just one, but I've had to do more than one power cycle at times. The rest of the modules that use that configuration information for different options will observe and change how they operate. They'll basically change their own coding based off of what's in the BCM as a configuration file. But when you do that, you're pulling the configuration file for that VIN number. So that's why I said, could I change the VIN numbers in all of those vehicles and then do a restore configuration? If I was able to change all of them, because you can't just change the BCM. This episode is brought to you by AutoRescueTools.com and Isaac Rodell. If you are looking to get into module programming, but you are not sure what kind of laptop you're going to need or how to set it up for programming, Isaac is your guy. He can set up laptops specifically to do control module programming for specific brands with partitioned hard drives and all the software that you're going to need to do this. He also sells key cutting equipment, scan tools, and other diagnostic equipment. I bought some stuff from him in the past, and the support is phenomenal. So I highly recommend checking out the website. Again, that's AutoRescueTools.com. The link will be in the show notes. I'll have a VIN mismatch code in other modules. But if I hit restore configuration, would that correct everything? Potentially. But again, you'd have to change all of the VIN numbers. And the thought crossed my mind of, well, maybe I could change the VIN number in the BCM, do a restore configuration, and then change it back to the other VIN number. Maybe that would have worked, but I didn't go that route. So sidetrack there. I didn't try that, but that might have worked. Right? Because really the point I'm making there is those VIN numbers have to match in those mission critical modules, or you're going to have other problems, mobilizer issues or lights on or things like that. We don't have existing with the Jeep right now. It runs, it starts. And obviously, we want to keep it that way. Okay, so the configuration file, which is the coding for the vehicle, can I alter that in just that without having to mess around with VIN numbers or anything like that or changing modules? I can. And that's, again, where I'm going with this and the option that we decided to go with. So there are multiple ways to do this and multiple tools that will do this, and I'm aware of those, but I'm going to give you the one that I used on this vehicle. And if you're going to go down this route, it is the one that I consider to be the most user-friendly. Again, some other options out there, they'll do it, and they'll do some probably even more stuff, but they're not as user-friendly as the tool that I used for this one, or the software that I used for this one. So this is Alpha OBD. And if you haven't heard of this, definitely check it out. It's kind of why I'm talking about this. Just Google Alpha OBD. They have a ton of information on their website. I'm not going to give you all the nitty gritty on the downloads and the tools that you need. You can get a cable, or you can get like a little Bluetooth adapter. It has links to the ones on the website, so you can go buy it. So again, I'm not going to list all that here. You can go check it out. Just Google Alpha OBD. And this is software that can be used on Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Lancia. I've never seen a Lancia. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. But also Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram vehicles. And those are the ones I see a lot of and where I've used this software. And you can use this as a normal scan tool. You can get codes and data stream and all that stuff. But you can also change the configuration file on these vehicles. And the thing that I like about Alpha OBD, much like Forescan, then Forescan is kind of the same thing, but for Fords, where I can go into the as-built data, right? That's the coding for Fords, essentially. And I can change the numbers in as-built. I can do that with IDS, but I don't know what the numbers mean. Forescan translates that for you to like say, hey, the splash screen on the radio is going to say Lincoln or Ford. It translates the coding data into English so that I just pick an option. Alpha OBD does the same thing. It's going to translate the coding to an option in English that you pick, and then you write that configuration. You're editing that configuration file that was downloaded from the Chrysler server in the BCM, which then hopefully the other modules in the vehicle will recognize and change their function. Okay. So once you download, and the software is like $60 or something like that, again, like Forescan, I mean, it's not as funny of a name, but it is equally as affordable of a software. And you buy for anywhere from a $50 to $100 dongle that you can use with this thing. And it's very affordable. You make your money back in one job with this. So you can go into I think it's the active diagnostic section and pick car configuration file. And then it'll pull up a lookup tab where you can select different options. And if you're in the BCM, there's a ton of different options. This is where it is a little tedious because you have to do some searching, but it has a search feature so you can type in a word that you think might come up. Here's the other thing. You may have to change more than one thing depending on what you're trying to do. And I'm going to go through both of them here so you get an understanding of what I'm talking about, but you do have to do a little bit of searching, and it's a little bit of trial and error because you're not going to find like a explanation on how to do this in service information, right? A lot of the times I'm doing this, it's trial and error. Let's change this, see what happens. And then I try to document it for future use. So if I run into another one, I know what to change. And hey, maybe there's something else that I've got to change on this one. We'll talk about that on the terrain switch part. It took me a little bit to figure that part of it out. So I go into this and I pull up the car configuration file and I do some searching for amplifier. And again, this was some trial and error, but I had to change two settings for this to work. Basically, there was a setting to say whether this was equipped with a stereo system that had an amplifier or not. And it was just listing like what audio setup does this vehicle have. And this is where RepairLink Shop came in handy because it outlined specifically like the title of the audio system that was being used. And so what I changed it to was from the one that was set up with the 679 VIN, the donor vehicle, if you will. And I changed it to what the 100 VIN was, which was the actual vehicle. And the difference, of course, being the amp. You can see that in the wiring diagrams too. If you look up the titles of the audio system, you can see one has an amp and one doesn't. So I changed that. That wasn't enough though. I had to go into the CAN configuration settings of the body control module as well. And this is under the car configuration file as well. But I changed it to say that it did not have an amplifier. Because I noticed there was a communication code for amplifier and the amplifier didn't exist on the vehicle. So basically you can turn on and off modules on a network. Now, of course, you want to be careful with this because some modules are important, but if they don't exist on the vehicle, you can turn them off and the BCM will stop looking for them. And it's going to also broadcast that configuration to the other modules in question that utilize that data. Number one, that's the radio in this case. So we're changing the stereo setup and we're changing the fact that there's an amplifier on the CAN, which there isn't in this vehicle, but that's the setting that I had to put into that BCM. We do our power cycles, and after that, the radio then works the way it's supposed to. I don't have my amplifier communication code, and I can adjust the volume normally. Hey, so that part of it's fixed. Took a little bit of trial and error. Wasn't too bad. We got that working. So how about the terrain switch? And again, he said that he already checked power, ground, and LIN. It's all there, but the switch does not light up, just like he said. So I go into the VIN attributes as well, and it turns out they have a different drivetrain system. The donor vehicle did not have a train switch, and I'm guessing it was probably just like an all-wheel drive. Like, you don't select the settings, you just have an all-wheel drive setup on that one. Whereas the Jeep that I'm currently sitting in does actually have that selectable terrain switch for the all-wheel drive. Now, here's the difference, and this took me some digging to figure this out. This was not as easy. I had to turn a module on in the configuration settings of the BCM. Actually, I had to turn two of them on. There was a setting for the terrain switch being active, and that's a LIN bus directly to the BCM, so I turned that on. But this is the other one, and this is the one that got me because I didn't quite understand that this needed to be there or was there at all. And this was a lot of different comparison with wiring diagrams and looking up the different 4x4 systems. But the vehicle that I was sitting in had a drivetrain control module, which I've replaced a ton of those in Jeeps. But when I did my initial scan, the drivetrain control module didn't come up. It just wasn't there. And if you've ever scanned a Chrysler vehicle, whether it be with YTech or even an aftermarket tool, like TopDown will do this, it actually gets the setup of the vehicle out of the BCM, and it will automatically, like TopDown does this, not just YTech. YTech will do it too, but it will automatically gray out modules that the BCM says isn't equipped on the vehicle, and won't even attempt communication with them. And again, same thing with the factory tooling. Drivetrain control modules just grayed out. It's not a no comment, just, hey, we're not equipped with this, because the 679 VIN number wasn't equipped with a drivetrain control module. And that's the difference in the 4x4 applications of this. So if you have a train switch, you have a drivetrain control module. So I not only had to turn on the terrain switch, but I had to go into the CAN configuration settings and turn on the drivetrain control module, do a power cycle, and then the switch lit up. It worked, and on my vehicle scan, I had to refresh the modules. Now I have a drivetrain control module I can talk to all of a sudden that wasn't there before. So those are the settings that I had to change in the BCM. And that was easy enough to do once I figured out what they are, and I documented that so that I can do it again in the future. So the customer's pretty happy at this point, right? They've got the two things working that they were not able to get working before. And we're going to charge them appropriately for that job because that is some custom work. But one thing I do want to mention here, and I think this is really important for you to understand and to make sure your customer understands if you go this route. Again, the right way to do this would probably have been all new modules and match them to the VIN number that's in the door. But if you're going to go this way and edit the configuration file in the BCM, and that vehicle ever goes anywhere where someone has YTech or factory scan tool application, and they hit that restore configuration button based off the VIN number that's in that BCM, all that's going to go away. It's going to go back to the state that it was in. And you have to let people know that if you're editing these configuration files. We've done this as well with air suspension in the Rams. Customers have chosen to delete that and they want the warning message gone. You can turn the air suspension module off of the CAN as well in the same style of what I just described. But if that vehicle goes to not only just the dealership, but anybody with YTech, and they hit restore configuration for whatever reason, maybe they're trying to do something else, all that's going to be lost. And the customer, whoever owns that vehicle, has to be aware of that. Now, how are they going to explain that to the dealership that they bring their truck in? I don't know. It's going to be tough. But they have to know and be like aware, like, hey, if you bring this in, all of this stuff could be erased, could be deleted. And you got to be okay with that, right? We're doing something that's outside of the norm, that's some custom work. And so some special considerations have to be taken with it going forward. Now, I have yet to find anybody that has an issue with that, but someone might. They might be like, well, I don't want to set my vehicle up, in a situation where all this could be erased so easily. But if we're going to do things outside of the normal scope, again, got to take special considerations. But the key is you got to let your customer know about that and make sure that they're okay with that. And I did in this case, and they were. And I don't know if they sell the vehicle to someone, how they're going to transfer that information to it. Again, this is a higher quality place, in my opinion. Maybe this vehicle isn't, but they'll handle it, hopefully. But I did my part. I did what was requested of me, and I got the components functioning. So is it the 100% right way to do things? Probably not. But does it work? Can we make some stuff happen? Yeah, we can. And it's something to consider too when we get into diagnostics with vehicles. Man, you can have some weird problems because of configuration settings, because of coding settings. And you can really get into the weeds if you're trying to diagnose something electrically that doesn't exist on the vehicle, or the module has been told, hey, don't do this because this part isn't equipped on this car. You can really get into the weeds. And so that's the other side note that I wanted to bring up about this, is that diagnosing a modern vehicle, in my opinion, nowadays requires at least the consideration of programming as well. I can't tell you how many times programming or coding has fixed a vehicle or is the reason the vehicle is broken. And if you're not even, and maybe you don't have the capability, but you're not even aware that that could be the issue in a certain case, man, you're going to chase your tail, waste a lot of time. And in a situation like that, maybe you get to like, oh, this module needs to be replaced. You replace the module, it does fix it, but could it have been corrected through coding? Maybe. Depends on the situation. Again, all depends on how you approach it or what the customer wants to do with their vehicle. But that's what I got for you today. Hopefully you found that interesting. Check out Repair Link Shop. Check out the VIN Check website and check out Alpha OBD. All really great resources that can do some cool stuff for you. But other than that, I'd like to thank everybody for listening to the show. All the feedback I get on the show, I always appreciate that. Other than that, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.